Welcome. I'm Domna Stanton, and we're doing this panel on issues in India and Pakistan. As I was mentioning, one of our colleagues could not get a visa, so we're going to try to Skype him in 20 minutes. Our organization is going to be 10 minutes for each of our colleagues here. We're giving our colleague who's Skyping in 20 minutes, and then we have 7 minutes, theoretically, for some conversation. Let me just raise a couple of issues with you and introduce the panel. We are kind of using as a catalyst in both instances of India and Pakistan the incidents that occurred with students and that we wrote about in Free to Think 2017. One incident occurred between disagreeing students at Ramjas College, which both of our colleagues here are from, at the University of Delhi. This left dozens of students injured. Several months later in Pakistan, a journalist student, Mashal Khan, was brutally attacked and killed by a mob at Abdul Wali Khan University after rumors circulated among the student body that Mr. Khan had maintained a Facebook page that published blasphemous content. So we're going to set the panel off in terms of attacks against higher education sector, specifically those involving students for our session, and then we're going to move on beyond that, hopefully to consider some other questions, such as the threat to higher education in India and Pakistan. For one, whether these have increased, what some of the patterns may be, and how this level of violence has affected universities in both India and Pakistan. So let me introduce our speakers. Vinita Chandra has done her graduate and postgraduate work from Delhi University in India, her PhD from Rutgers University in the USA. She's been teaching English literature at Ramjas College in Delhi for the past 31 years. Her area of specialization is post-colonial studies, and this has led her to interrogate structures of power and to teach her students, as we try all of us to do, to think critically and challenge established idea. She's also been part of the struggle in Delhi against repressive academic reforms and the shutting down of democratic spaces. Our next colleague, Mukul Mangalik, has been teaching history also at Ramjas College for almost 3 decades, where he researches issues related to the histories of labor, especially railway labor and the everyday work and lives of shepherds in the Himalayas. He's also made documentary films on these 2 subjects. I don't think I'm going to introduce Professor Khan, who's going to be on after we hear from both of our speakers, and I think you're going to begin.
Good morning. I teach English literature in Ramjas College in Delhi University. Delhi University is made up of about 60 colleges, of which Ramjas is one. And in the tradition of encouraging debate and discussion, Delhi University has actually institutionalized holding seminars, conferences, festivals, for which students pay a yearly fee. They pay a seminar fee when they pay their annual fees. And the money is allotted to each department in order to hold seminars. That's part of the tradition of Delhi University. Delhi University has also institutionalized extracurricular activities. So students pay a fee for extracurricular activities, and admissions to the university, a very small percentage is done on extracurricular achievements. So the founding of the university has taken into account the idea that the classroom is not a closed space. And I'm actually going to talk about the seminar that we held last year called Cultures of Protest, which was jointly organized by the English department in Ramjas College and the extracurricular society called Literary Society. So the 2 of them came together to organize this conference. And as we sat in crowded classrooms over long afternoons to discuss what the seminar should be about, we realized that the world outside was not just seeping into our classroom, it had indeed taken over the classroom. And as we talked about who we wanted to call and what we wanted to talk about, the issues that came up were caste, gender, region, media reporting, student movements, resistance through the arts. And it was not long before we realized that what we were looking at were ways of protesting. And so our seminar came to be called Cultures of Protest. And partly what had happened is that the last year had seen a huge rise in student protests across the country. And our students were aware, therefore, not only of a regime that's getting more and more oppressive, but of movements of resistance that are happening alongside. But then, of course, Delhi University doesn't exist in vacuum. It exists in the political environment that is there in India right now. And so the students in Delhi University participate in an electoral process in which we elect a student union. There's a Delhi University student union, and then there is, every college has its own local students union. And the students union last year was made up of the ABVP, which supports the ruling party, the BJP, and they're actually a student wing of the RSS, which is a right-wing Hindu nationalist group. And actually, their agenda is to have a Hindu nation, is to have Hindu nationalism. And so as we all know that when you have right-wing nationalism, then any voice of protest is considered anti-national. And so it was not long before Cultures of Protest came under their scanner. What followed was an unprecedented state-sponsored attack on our seminar. Now, we organize seminars every year. I teach literature. This is what we do. I teach post-colonialism. I teach questioning authority. So it was not the first time that we were having a seminar like this. But the attack that was there on the seminar, I have never seen before. It was unprecedented. And the ostensible excuse for it was that one of the people we had called was anti-national. It's a young scholar called Umar Khalid, who should actually be here. And Umar Khalid had been called, we had called him because his doctoral work is on the tribals in Bastar, the Adivasis. And he is, it's the work that he's doing for his PhD. So we had called him to talk about that. But a year before, Umar Khalid had been arrested as a student of JNU because he was one of the organizers of a talk in which apparently anti-national slogans were raised. He was in jail for a while. It's 2 years later. No charge sheet has been filed against him so far. And so when the excuse that they used to stop our conference was that Umar Khalid had been invited. And I was called to the principal's office, and I was told that there were large numbers of ABVP students gathering outside and saying that we could not go ahead with the seminar. And that the police could not provide security either for us or for Umar Khalid, and therefore we had to ask him not to come in. We tried to say to the police that it is our job to have seminars and that it is their job to give us security, but we were told that they were helpless and they could not provide security at all. We also tried to ask them to engage with us in debate and discussion, but there seemed to be no interest at all. And soon our college foyer was full of very hyper-masculine, violent men who were shouting, and the police said to us that they could not get them out from there. When we informed the students that we were not going to have Umar Khalid come in, they spontaneously decided to go on a short march around the college. And they raised slogans of freedom. They raised slogans saying the police should get out of the campus because they were not doing their work, that the ABVP should leave. And as we came back from our protest, we were shocked to find a violent mob attacking us. We were attacked for a while. We were pushed up into a conference room to continue with the conference. As we continued with the conference, stones were thrown in through the window. The electricity was cut off. The police came again and said to us, we have to evacuate you from here. We cannot give you security. We ran out of the back gate, and we were told that that they could not get rid of the aggressive students. The next day, there was a protest by a left-wing group in the university, and we all came for the protest. But again, our students were locked into the college for about 4 hours, and they were beaten with the help of the police, who kept saying they were giving them protection, but allowed the violent students to break the cordon again and again. So this was the actual incident, and the violence on the students and the teachers was shocking and unprecedented, but it kind of followed a script that we know. So that part, of course, is what happened, and that follows a script that we all know. But what was totally unexpected was the way our students reacted to it. 2 minutes? Okay. Okay. So what was totally unexpected was the way that our students reacted to the violence on both days. Now, almost all of these students have never faced violence in their lives, and nothing that had happened until then had prepared them for the violence they were going to face. But they did not run away from the attack. They did not back down. On the first day when they were confronted with a violent mob, they stood there and they chanted Azadi, which means freedom. They shouted back at them, saying that you should be ashamed of yourselves, get out of our space. They, as other students heard they were being attacked, more and more students came in solidarity. They saw people being hit, being beaten by stones, falling down next to them, but they did not run away at all. On the second day, when we were hemmed in for a long time, for about 4 hours, the students sat there and sang songs of peace and songs of love. And I think what's for me the most remarkable thing is that at no point at all did our students retaliate with violence. There was not a single hand raised on our side. There was not a single stone thrown on our side. And the contrast between the students who were beating them, faces contorted with hate, shouting, beat them with shoes, get them out of here, and our own students who were singing loudly and cheerfully, with solidarity, with comradeship for each other. I think what came out for me at that point, that nonviolence is not a passive thing. Nonviolence is very active. Nonviolence, it has empathy, it was participated, it was innovative. They sang different kinds of songs, they held hands as they were beaten. And I asked them in the end afterwards, and I've asked them again and again, I said, why did you not run away? You were being beaten, you should have run. What was it that made you stay there? And I think they can't quite articulate what they want to say, but they say we would have lost everything if we had run away. We would have lost. And it's taken me a while, and I think coming for this seminar has made me think about it a little bit more and think about what it means to be a scholar. And I think as a scholar, my relevance depends only upon the students. If the students don't respond, then we're not really scholars. We have no one to speak to. And I think the most valuable thing for me in all this, since we're talking about scholars at risk, is that what we teach in class, actually takes place outside the class as well, has its effect outside the class. And to see this spontaneous resistance, which was not planned at all. There were not students who planned a protest. There were students who were suddenly being beaten and had to respond in a certain way. I think that was the most valuable lesson for me, and that didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a long movement, which Mukul is going to talk about, that's been happening with students. And I'm just going to very quickly conclude by saying that this year, on the anniversary of what happened last year, Mukul organized a seminar from the history department in which we were sure we'd be beaten and it went off okay. And I organized another seminar calling a similar kinds of people, which also went off successfully. The ABVP lost their elections this year when they went into the student elections. This is not to say everything is okay, but just to say that the moment of resistance, just for an ephemeral moment, has made some difference.
Thank you.
I just need to, I don't know how to do this. I just need to click on this so that it comes here. Is that this particular poster, please?
This poster.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, morning. I'm particularly happy to be here at this conference for three reasons. Number one, Wilhelm von Humboldt, I think, spoke about the need for university to be generating knowledge based upon rigorous research, and at the same time then sharing that knowledge and accumulated knowledge with society. So I'm very glad to be part of a conference that's sort of co-sponsored by the Wilhelm von Humboldt Stiftung. Number two, the Freie Universität. I think yesterday this was talked about, but 1966 to 1968, the student movement that came up here in the Freie Universität, it became part of a worldwide student movement that actually rocked the world in the most progressive ways without taking power. And I am very glad that I'm part of a conference that has also been co-organized by the Freie Universität. And finally, for a long time, for many, many years now, I have stood by and believed in the principles of solidarity. I've really believed that if there is a threat to democracy, or if there's a threat to universities or workspaces or to freedom and liberty and the pursuit of truth anywhere in the world, then that is a threat to all these things everywhere in the world. So I'm very glad to be part of a conference that's been organized by SAR. So these three things, but together with the feeling of happiness, this comes sort of tinged with pain. And that pain, in a sense, arises precisely from what Vinita has talked about, because we were both, as teachers, in the thick of whatever happened at Ramjas College. And that pain has been expressed by various people in various ways, but I just want to quote from an old teacher of mine, an 85-year-old professor called Romela Thapa, who's a very well-known historian of India, of Indian history, teaching at who used to teach the JNU. And when the Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is one of the premier leading institutions for critical thought and critical learning in every field, that's also like the student movements of 68. It's entering its 50th. It's entered its 50th year, and the attack that the universities in India are actually facing in a very systematic manner. Ramjas, it happens to be only one of that. In a very systematic manner, that actually began in real earnestness in February 2016 with the attack by the ABVP, which is the student wing of the RSS, which is the core private militia of the Hindu right-wing organization, This begins in February 2016, and Romela, who'd been one of the co-founders of JNU, when she saw what was happening for the first time in the history of JNU, she wrote the following two small paragraphs, which I do wish to quote. For those of us who were among the founding members of JNU, the attack on the university is a moment of a bigger intellectual and emotional crisis than has ever happened before. JNU was founded on the principles of democratic functioning, both administratively and in the content of the education it imparted. It meant a generally positive relationship between teacher and student, and a frequency of free discussion, both on matters academic and on the world we live in. It meant more rigorous training in the subjects taught, and this experience improved the work, both of teachers and students, all of which was underlined by an insistence on critical inquiry. We were conscious of stretching our minds to beyond what was really known and encouraging students to look beyond the obvious. To see the BJP RSS government trying to annul what we have achieved in JNU and reduce the university to a pedestrian teaching shop is like having to see the work of one's lifetime being systematically destroyed. Many of us chose to work in JNU rather than take up lucrative positions in universities abroad because we had a vision that we could make it among the best academic centers located in India, and that excellence it has experienced. As one academic who lived a substantial part of my life working in the JNU and contributing to this vision, the hostility of the current government to the JNU leaves me with a sense of despair and sadness for the future of universities in India. That's the kind of That's the kind of pain that I just want to, that's the kind of pain that I experience in recollecting whatever was happened at Ramjas College with all of us, our students, teachers, about a year ago or 14 months ago. So that's why I'm saying it's sort of happy to be here. At the same time, it's a happiness tinged with pain, recollecting what happened, recollecting the details, and then trying to share them with you. Two things I'll do as quickly as possible. One is, I will not repeat what Vinita said, but I do want to draw out what was really unprecedented about what happened at Ramjas College. She did mention that it was unprecedented, but I just want to flesh it out. Because what we saw at Ramjas College, even though we've been teaching there for so many years, and we are no strangers to violence on campus, it was completely unprecedented, and I want to just say why this was the case. Never before, number one, never before had any college of Delhi University been almost taken over by a violent mob for over 2 full days. Never before had I seen or experienced such viciousness, hate and fury in the language and actions of the aggressors. The feeling that they might or would in fact do absolutely anything. Number 3, this was premeditated, systematic and organized mass violence enacted with the clear purpose of sending out a message not just to many at Ramjas but to all colleges and universities, at least in Delhi, that henceforth it would be the ABVP that would call the shots at universities, not the invaluable pillars of academic autonomy, democratic rights and the principles enshrined in the Indian Constitution, without all of which universities cannot survive as universities. Number 4, never before had I been forced to go underground for fear of being singled out and physically targeted by students at Delhi University, some of them my own students of history at Ramjas College. Not just on Feb 22nd, but for a few days thereafter as well. Number 5, the attack in all its elemental ugliness and perversity was being celebrated even as it was happening by the very people who were carrying it out. And number 6, the police at best allowed this macabre dance of violence and mayhem to go on, more or less unchecked, or at worst, were hand in glove with the ABVP. As for the students and teachers of Ramjas College who were attacked, I'd like to say unequivocally that they were not in the wrong at all. They did nothing that was illegal, unconstitutional, undemocratic, or professionally or ethically wrong. They were in fact organizing. They were in fact, by organizing the seminar on cultures of protest, doing what all teachers and students don't just have the right to do, but the duty to do. Far from doing anything, absolutely anything wrong, they were in fact being prevented all of a sudden on the morning of February 21st, 2017, from doing their legitimate work within the premises of their own college, their place of work, the crucible of livelihoods, meanings, dreams, friendships, collegiality, struggles, freedoms, and all the other things that make university life and life itself worth living. I just want to quickly also suggest to you that what we are talking about, I mentioned the case of JNU, but what makes what happened at Ramjas really frightening and really grave is, as I said in the beginning, that this is part of a pattern. It's not like there has been no systematic violence on universities at earlier times, but since 2014, which is when the current Hindu nationalist supremacist government took power, these attacks have become very, very systematic. And they are happening across the country. I'm talked only about Delhi University and the JNU, but you go to universities in Rajasthan, you go to universities in Uttar Pradesh, which is the heart of North India, you go to universities in Madhya Pradesh, you go to universities in Hyderabad, the Hyderabad Central University, the Pune in 2015, which is the premier film and television institute of India. Across the country, over these 3 years, students, teachers, researchers, universities have been systematically targeted. And the attempt is to create, so that's number 1. Number 2, that the way in which the attacks have proceeded, there is a pattern there as well. Because what happens is the ABVP, which is the student wing of the RSS, is asked to locate any particular group which is taking up critical discussions on contemporary issues. They could be to do with academic issues, they could be to do with what's happening in the world outside, not only the country, South Asia, the world outside. To send them in, create a situation of confrontation so that the police can be brought in and then go in for the kill. by deploying the trope of nationalism and herd sentiment, religious sentiments, etc., etc. So it's a particular pattern in the way in which this happened. And nationalism of a particular kind, the exclusivist, supremacist variety of nationalism, that is what is sought to be deployed. Patriotism, yeah. That's what sought to be deployed. And finally, what I want to say is that we need to quickly understand that the depth of the crisis we are in, why these attacks are taking place on such a sustained basis across universities across the country. And I'd just like to flag quickly two issues. One is three things. One is that I think, what has been remarkable about the history of Indian universities, especially after 1947, is that these public universities, for whatever reason they might have been created, once students and teachers actually came into these universities, they actually have been moving towards transforming these universities into people's universities, with all their limitations. There are many limitations to the way public universities function. But I think there's been an attempt to try and move towards the possibility contained in the public university, operating within a democratic framework, to keep moving it towards becoming more inclusive in a variety of ways and functioning more and more democratically, and thereby intervening critically in what is happening in society. And I think what we are witnessing is a counter-revolution. And this counter-revolution in the university and in politics and society is driven, number one, by the need to privatize. So democracy is and democratized universities, inclusive universities, that they have been coming under attack actually since over the last 7 or 8 years. But this is now converging from 2014 onwards. That I don't think was as dangerous. I mean, it is dangerous to democracy. But I think this convergence between a fascist political party and the drive which is already longer term towards privatization and therefore to dismantle democracy, I think these two coming together are creating a situation where none of our lives and life at university is at stake. And to that extent, democracy is at I'm sorry.
Okay, is that better? Okay, so Professor Khan's work focuses on education, development, and program evaluation in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Lebanon for international, bilateral, and multilateral organizations.
Okay. All right, great,
for
thank you.
example,
Start.
the World Bank, USAID, Save the Children, Human Rights Watch, and so forth. Khan received his PhD in sociology from New York University, funded by a 5-year Fulbright scholarship, and his research on madrasas in Pakistan won the Social Science Research Council's International Dissertation Research Fellowship. He has an MA in English Literature and a BA in Political Science from the University of Baluchistan in Pakistan. Welcome, Professor Khan. Where is he actually?
He's right behind you. He's in New York. He's in New York.
He's in New York, okay.
And can you hear? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Just one quick question. Is my slides, do I need to share the screen, or they're on the screen already? The slides, my presentation slides.
What's that?
My presentation slides, are they on?
No, they're not. I think you should just give it in person. Just give it.
Oh, okay.
Just give it.
All right. Okay, all right. So everybody, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here, at least virtually, if not in person. I would just jump to the presentation without further ado. So my presentation today is primarily focuses on a few things. One is the scale of the attacks on higher education in Pakistan, types of attacks, motives behind them, and then I will move on to describing some major attacks on higher education and how the government responded. to those attacks. And at the end, I will conclude the presentation with some illustrative recommendations. So, just to start, education in Pakistan, attacks on education in Pakistan are not uncommon. Since 2004, there have been over 850 attacks on education in Pakistan, and that includes attacking the property, premises, teachers, and students. And majority of those attacks occur just in one province, that's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where close to 80% of the attacks took place. Oh, that's okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. No, that puts things in perspective. The range of the attacks, it varies from targeted assassination to large coordinated attacks on educational institutions. Mainly these attacks are carried out by religious, so-called religious band organizations in Pakistan that include Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Lashkar-e-Jhangvi is another one. The third one is Lashkar-e-Islam. Some of them are mainstream Taliban organizations. The other are offshoots of Pakistan Taliban. Some of the perpetrators also have non-religious agenda, like the Baloch Liberation Army, which is involved in a low-level insurgency in one of the provinces in Pakistan called Balochistan, had also been involved in some of those attacks on education. The motives of behind these attacks are sometimes difficult to describe. One, definitely, in some attacks, it's been clearly indicated that the opposition was to the kind of education being taught in these institutions. This could be the perception of secular Western curricula being taught in those schools. Or educating girls could be another motive or part of the motive. Religious orientation, in other words, for example, Shia community within the country has been targeted and educational institutions. And one big factor could be, or a motive is also these institutions represent the state of Pakistan. They're used more as symbols of the state. Some of the major attacks that I was saying in the beginning that I would describe include the attack on a women's university in Balochistan province. That was in 2013. The university is called Sardar Bahadur Khan Women's University. A female suicide bomber boarded a university bus on the campus of the university in the city of Quetta and detonated the explosives, killed 14 students on the bus. Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, which is mainly an anti-Shia organization, claimed responsibility for the attack. It was a coordinated attack. Once the attack on the university took place, injured were took to a nearby hospital, and there another set of terrorists were waiting. Another suicide bomber detonated the explosives. It was followed by a gun battle. More casualties occurred. A total of 45 people were killed in that attack. The initial assessment of that report was that the primary target of the first attack on the university bus was Shia students, and those female students would take almost every day the same bus, but for some reason there weren't many of those Shia girls on that bus that day. That was 2013. The other attack was in Bacha University in another province, that happened on the 20th of January 2016. 4 men carrying guns and wearing suicide vests attacked this university and killed at least 22 people and injured another 20 people. The injured and killed included students, faculty, and security guard. This attack was done by the Pakistani Taliban, and the statement, chilling statement that was released after the attack reads like this. And I'll just quote the full statement. It says, "We will continue to attack schools, colleges, and universities across Pakistan, as these are the foundations that use apostate. This is the place where lawyers are made. This is the place that produces military officers. And this is the place that produces members of parliament, all of whom challenge Allah's sovereignty." This message was given by the command of the Taliban, who was responsible behind the planning of the attack on Bacha University in 2016. The third attack, which happened almost exactly a year ago on the 13th of April 2017, and that was the lynching and killing of a journalism student. His name is Imran Khan. He was a student at Abdul Wali Khan University, was killed by an angry mob over fake allegations of posting blasphemous material on his Facebook. This was one of the brutal incidents that one could imagine. There are tons of material on the internet. What the sad thing about this story is that it's not just the mob, but if you, it's the university in some ways also failed these students. So the day, blasphemy, as most of you would know, is a very, very sensitive issue in Pakistan. So on the day Imran Khan was killed by his fellow students and his fellow students and some university staff, close to 150 people were involved in that attack. The university posted a notice in the morning saying that a committee was formed to investigate the three students, Abdullah, Khan, and Zubair, and that these students were suspended temporarily pending the investigation. The point I'm just to make here is that when you post something publicly that some people are being accused of blasphemy or they're investigated for that, it makes them extremely vulnerable to violent attacks. And that's what happened to Imran Khan also. The case sparked for country nationally and internationally. Blasphemy is also used, the allegations used as settling scores, or it's used for revenge also. So sometimes before the truth comes up, people are already hurt. So in 2011, a governor of our house, Punjab, Salman Taseer, was killed by his own guard because he perceived that he was committing blasphemy by supporting a Christian woman who was imprisoned uh, who was listed for blasphemy as well. The university formed a committee of 3 people to investigate this incident, which was the notice was the notice about Michelle Khan's investigation was put on the same day in the morning, which I just mentioned. That was announcing that these students were accused of blasphemy, and in some circles, this has also been believed that that notice might have contributed to the mobilization of the mob against this individual. So the point I'm making here is that sometimes when these incidences happens in higher education, universities are not, or they don't know how to handle these institutions. So instead of protecting students or their faculty, or the absence of proper procedures or protocols, it might lead to actually making these individuals more vulnerable to violent attacks. Most recently, on December 1st, 2017, 3 men disguised in burqas stormed our agriculture training institute, killing at least 9 people. And all right. Okay, I'll move to the recommendation part, at least one slide. Okay, so okay, I would now it's a shame that you can't see some of the slides because it would have been easier for me to present some of those cases. The primary, I have a few, I have a list of recommendations to present, but I would just talk about one since I'm out of time, is, which is very important, I think, and relevant to this discussion, is that higher education in Pakistan should work with law enforcement agencies and risk network to develop official protocols or standard operating procedures to manage blasphemy cases at campus in order to prevent violent attacks against students, teachers, and staff. The development of such protocols would require an assessment of existing procedures and systems at higher education, and also a collaborative process with universities across the country, and particularly the Higher Education Commission that oversees universities in Pakistan. Thank you. Jesse?
Again, as you know, we were supposed to finish at 12. It is lunch, and we will stay a few more minutes to take some of your questions. I think we should go right to the questions from the audience, if that's all right. Yes. So, are there any questions? And whether that's about generally the issue of attacks on students, let's expand it to faculty. Let's expand it also to governmental response to such attacks. And finally, what, if anything, can SAR do or should do to assist our colleagues and show solidarity with them? Any questions? You're all very hungry, yes? Perhaps you want to add something to what you said before?
I guess if we're thinking about solidarity, I think as Mukul was saying, that what's really important is for all of us to come together. And after the incident happened in February last year, it was covered by national media. And what happened is that from across the world, we got messages of solidarity, which really meant a lot to us. And although Ramjas is seen as a place where there's violence now, so parents are scared to put their children in there. But the other thing is that Ramjas is now a place that's known for its resistance. And I think one thing that SAR could do perhaps is extend solidarity in some way, that would make the government realize, because the government, this particular government, depends very much on its public image. And I think if there was some acknowledgement that we know what's happening outside, I think that perhaps would make a big difference.
Another question is whether they've been repeat incidents. I wasn't sure whether these have continued. Have they abated? What would you say about that? Would you like to answer?
Yeah, I think what has been remarkable in a way is that over the last 1 year, when all of this happened, we were really feeling that like things would get frozen. It would be impossible to teach. It would be impossible to freely do what we are meant to do. And then slowly over the last 1 year, I think as a result also of the resolve which has been shown by students, that we are here at university, we are here to actually engage in the adventure of ideas, and we need to find ways of continuing to do that which we are meant to do. So slowly, day by every day, I think we've been able to reclaim the university space, at least in Ramjas College. This particular organization actually lost the Students' Union election in September. So that also has created a certain space, but let me not be over-optimistic. Because the thing is that it's a very, very organized force that we're dealing with. And I think it's like they're waiting in the wings. So what we need to constantly remind ourselves is that there is no rest. That I think a struggle has to go on very, very intelligently, and we have to be alert all the time to what is happening, not only in Ramjas and Delhi University, but in universities all over the country, which I think is tied up also with the wider politics of this political formation. And I think unless we are aware of this and keep dealing with this, the university cannot exist in isolation. And I just want to end by saying that, the last couple of days, if I go to the topography of terror, or if I go to the university plats where the book burning happened, and there is the glass where you can look down and there are these empty shelves, or when I come across the Stolpensteine, then in a way I just feel, just to give you a sense of where we are, I really feel that what I'm seeing in the topography of terror, or what I'm seeing in that glass, through the glass, it's actually a glimpse of the past, which is a glimpse into our present in India, and also perhaps a glimpse into what might happen in the future. So I don't want to sound over-optimistic at all. We are in deep trouble in India, not only, but also because of the particular government which happens to be in power.
Thank you so much. Professor Khan, are you still there? Do you
Yeah.
have some thoughts in terms of the current situation, government response, and what SAR might be able to do to help?
Yeah, so for the government response, I think it's the response does not specifically focus protecting education in Pakistan. The response only emerged after the army school was attacked in December of 2014, and the plan is called National Action Plan, and it primarily focuses on uprooting terrorism from the country. It's a list of 20 points, and most of those points read like goal or mission statements. There is no details of how those objectives or goals will be implemented. So there isn't any specific strategy from the government. But what happened after some of the attacks on education is the government tried to come up with a couple of strategies, and one of them included training school teachers and children in use of firearms. And that was, of course, widely criticized. Apart from that, we don't see anything major happening on the side of the government, except that asking universities to increase security at their premises.
Thank you. Thank you all for your patience with our technological issues. I'm sure our two colleagues here would be happy to answer individual questions if you have them. Thank you again.